the question is, if when you die, right, you find yourself in a place of judgment in front of God, and it ends up being the case that all those pesky Christians were right all along, what would your first statement be to God? If you could choose anything to say to God at that point, what would it be and why? For example, Bertrand Russell, when asked this question, said he would ask God why he didn't give enough evidence of his existence. Would you echo that, or would you say something else? I'm really curious about this.
Well, you ask what statement I'd make, but then refer to a question. So I'm going to assume that I'm allowed to ask questions. I've got quite a few. I've just jotted down the first 25, which I'll run through fairly quickly. They're as follows. Where did you come from? Who made you? What were you doing for eternity before you created the heavens and the earth? How did you do it? It wasn't bad for a first attempt, but don't you think that you really messed up? Do you think it was a mistake to make the tree of knowledge? Do you think it was a mistake to make the serpent? That was just an accident waiting to happen, wasn't it? Can you see into the future? If so, did you not foresee that everything would go wrong? Why did you use a flood to commit global genocide? You spoke the heavens and the earth into existence. Wouldn't you have saved Noah a great deal of time if you'd just spoken people out of existence? Have you attended any anger management courses since you committed global genocide and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah? Whilst we're on the subject of heaven, don't you think you went a little bit over the top? That is to say, there's an awful lot of space out there just for us to live on the crust of one small planet. Why did you make the universe expand? What's the ultimate fate of the universe? Is the gravitational constant actually constant? Where is the dark matter, and what is it? I like the swans, but did you have to make syphilis as well? Can you prevent suffering? If so, why do you allow it? Were you behind the Haiti earthquake? Is Jerry Falwell in here? Do people grow old in heaven? I've just thought of another one. Are people naked in heaven? Do you get to choose how old you will be in heaven? If so, does that mean I could actually choose to be older than my mother? Do babies and children grow up in heaven if they've died young? If so, to what age? Who looks after them if their parents are still alive? Do they have to go to school? Do you have a good library here? What about access to the internet? Now, I suspect that that's not quite what you meant by that question. I think what you were asking for is what reaction I would have if I suddenly realised there was a God. I still would ask him a question, and it's this. I'd only ask this one. If someone leads a moral life in accordance with your rules and regulations, but did not believe in you, does that person go to hell? That is to say, is a simple lack of belief sufficient to condemn someone to eternity in hell's fires?
What sort of evidence would you find sufficient for you to abandon atheism and become a believer in God? Not particularly Christianity per se, but just God, like a general sort of theism. Would it be physical evidence, like a burning bush or maybe a booming voice from the sky? Or would you still be skeptical at that point and require more evidence? So what I'm trying to ask is, what's the type of evidence that for you would warrant theistic belief, and what degree would make it sufficient?
Let me turn that question around on you. What evidence would be required for you to believe in another God? Presumably you believe in the Christian God. What evidence would you require for you to believe in Zeus, or the multitude of other gods that have existed in the minds of people, past and also present? As for what would convince me, I frequently said to people, if they can prove to me that the Bible contains the Word of God, without actual reference to the Bible, otherwise it becomes a self-serving statement, then that would be sufficient. I would get down on my knees straight away and praise the good Lord. So there you are, that's all I need. Prove to me the Bible is the Word of God.
Third, do you think the new atheist movement is ultimately a good thing or a bad thing for freethinkers and skeptics? I define the new atheist movement to be something like the following. The new trend of removing respect from religion in conversations, you know, the sort of attitude that one finds in a Richard Dawkins or a Christopher Hitchens, where anti-theism starts to pop its head up a bit more. Do you think that sort of thing is ultimately good or bad, and why?
I think you somewhat misquoted Dawkins there. I think what he says is that religion has received in the past undue respect. I'm not aware that he has ever indicated that theists should be treated without respect, nor have I seen him treat theists without respect. All an atheist is saying is that we don't believe that there's a God. I really don't see that is disrespectful to anyone, and if someone is so sensitive that they consider it is, then I think that's a sad indictment upon them. I also think it's of note that it is quite often the theists that are totally disrespectful to atheists. The classic criticism which we face is that because we don't believe in a God, we are immoral. I mean, it's obviously a completely foundless accusation, but it's not respectful. It's quite offensive. I think what's also offensive is the theists who tell homosexuals that they're going to burn in hell for eternity. You don't get that from atheists, I'm afraid. So I don't fully understand where you're coming from with that question. I really don't see that there is a new atheist movement. I think that perhaps all that has happened is that atheists have become more vocal, but by doing so I don't see that they're being in any way disrespectful. I just add one last thing to that. What I do think is worthy of contempt is the Roman Catholic Church's view on the use of condoms. I think that that is something that should be spoken out about. I think it's a contemptible, offensive policy to have, and it costs the lives of millions and causes the suffering of millions. And I have no qualms about speaking out in relation to that issue, and if that is being disrespectful, then so be it. They deserve disrespect for that.
Fourth, what sorts of decisions are affected by your atheism? I really like this question. I like my own question. Wow, that's not the height of narcissism. Okay, let me unpack what I mean here. Are there decisions that you make in your life, aside from the obvious denial of theism, that are a direct result of your views on the non-existence or lack of evidence for God? So, for example, political choices, or moral choices, or economic choices. Is there anything that atheism has impacted in such a way that you can look back and say, you know, I don't think I would hold this other view if I wasn't an atheist?
No, none.
And lastly, my fifth and final question, what is more important to you as an atheist? I mean, I guess this could really apply to you as a person, not simply an atheist, but what's more important? Acquiring as many true beliefs as possible, or not acquiring as many false beliefs as possible?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. I'm not trying to avoid answering it, I simply don't understand it, but it has jogged my memory of a short clip of Richard Feynman, which I'll play. I think he sums up my attitude more eloquently than I can express it.
Start out understanding religion by saying everything is possibly wrong. Let us see. As soon as you do that, you start sliding down an edge, which is hard to recover from. And so with the scientific view, or my father's view, that we should look to see what's true and what may not be true, once you start doubting, which I think to me is a very fundamental part of my soul, is to doubt and to ask. And when you doubt and ask, it gets a little harder to believe. You see, one thing is I can live with doubt and uncertainty and not knowing. I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers which might be wrong. I have approximate answers and possible beliefs and different degrees of certainty about different things, but I'm not absolutely sure of anything. And then many things I don't know anything about, such as whether it means anything to ask why we're here and what the question might mean. I might think about it a little bit. If I can't figure it out, then I go to something else. But I don't have to know an answer. I don't feel frightened by not knowing things, by being lost in the mysterious universe without having any purpose, which is the way it really is as far as I can tell, possibly. It doesn't frighten me.